Okay. All right. So how about just a little bit of Hanukkah, oh Hanukkah. Oh Hanukkah, come light the menorah. Let's have a party, we'll all dance the hora. Gather round the table, we'll give you a treat. Dreidels to play with and latkes to eat. And while we are playing, the candles are burning low. One for each night, they shed a sweet light to remind us of days long ago. One for each night, they shed a sweet light to remind us of days long ago. Hi, everyone. Happy Hanukkah in advance. I think I know everybody here, but for anyone who's watching this later on, perhaps on YouTube, I'm Rabbi Julie Hilton Danan from Seaside Jewish Community. And this is, this may be the last installment in the 2024 Rabbi Seminar on a deep dive into the Jewish holidays with the topic of the Women of Hanukkah. And God willing, starting I think in February, we'll start on the new topic, which will be the follow-up from the original Rabbi Seminar, and it will be about Jews in search of God, but in the modern period. So looking forward to that. Okay. Let's see what else I have here. I'm going to just share my screen for a moment so we can show this. Okay. Can you see it okay? Do you see my screen?
It hasn't come through.
Oh, there it is. Okay.
Okay. I'm going to also, now you're probably seeing too much of it. I'm going to show you the slideshow. Let's start with it. Okay. Now do you see the Women of Hanukkah slide? Yes? Elaine, let me know. Do you see it? Okay, great.
Yes, we see it.
We're seeing it from here.
Great. All right. So now let's say a blessing for the study of Torah, because we are learning something that is Torah. Even that doesn't mean it's in the 5 books of Moses, as we'll see it is not, but it is part of Jewish teachings. That's the broader meaning of Torah. So you could say this with me, read it, or amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Holy One of blessing, your presence fills creation. You made us holy with mitzvot, and you bid us to engage ourselves with words of Torah. So just to clarify, I don't think I'm going to read this whole entire slide. You can look at it. You know, the story of Hanukkah is interesting because it is not only not in the Jewish Bible. Some of the books of Maccabees, I think, are in the Catholic Bible, but they're not at all in our Tanakh, Torah, prophets, or writings. And even the Talmud really just mentions it kind of in passing, interestingly. But that's a subject for another day. So where do we learn about Hanukkah? We learn from some other ancient books, including 1st and 2nd Maccabees, that started to be written about 45 years after the first Hanukkah, in Judea, and then later for Jews in Egypt, in Alexandria. Then a few centuries later in the Midrash, Pesikta Rabbati, in the Apocrypha, the books that didn't get into the Jewish Bible, the Book of Judith, a book called Megillat Ta'anit, which has, it's composed in the Talmudic period, and it's all about holidays, even though it means like the scroll of fasts, but it's actually about festivals, and some other midrashim. So that's where we kind of get our knowledge of Hanukkah. Now, this is kind of my favorite slide ever. And that is my chocolate Maccabees. Did anyone here growing up ever have chocolate Maccabees? I'm going to go back to the screen. Raise your hand if you had chocolate Maccabees. Yes. Well, Carol, you and I were raised right then, because we had them, even in San Antonio, we had them. I think they were, I think from Barton's chocolate. And I find them a very ironic candy. if you could say that, because Hanukkah is supposed to be about, among other things, Hanukkah is about Jewish distinctiveness, right? Jews not assimilating, not being just blending into the greater culture, but having our own customs and our own ways of life. But it's ironic that, in fact, a lot of things about Hanukkah actually were turned around into being sort of the opposite of that, right? Like, what do we have? You know, we have a certain annual, every 4 years, we have this kind of Jewish Olympics, right? Which sounds kind of Greek, the Olympics. And what do we call it? Anybody know? You can unmute and tell us if you know. Unmute and let us know.
The Maccabee Games.
Yes.
Right, the Maccabea, right? The Maccabea is the same thing. And it's named for the Maccabees, but they were supposed to be fighting against this assimilation into the Greeks. It's a little funny. And then we have Hanukkah, you know, around Christmas time, so it gets a lot of the trappings of Christmas, including a lot of presents and decorations and even chocolate Maccabees, right? And Jeffrey, why don't you tell us what you just wrote there? Josie, yeah.
I also mentioned that the Jewish turncoat historian Josephus
Yes.
mentions the Maccabee revolt in the first part of the Jewish wars, and that was written in the first century Common Era, really after the fall of the first revolt and the fall of the temple. So
I think that's
the source of Hanukkah. But
and
what's that? I'm sorry.
No, please continue.
All right, but from what I read, whether or not whether or not you consider it a primary source is another question.
Yeah.
But he does mention the revolt in some detail, so that's just another source.
That's a good point. I think the sources I have are the ones that we look at in traditional Jewish circles. They looked at the Talmud and the Midrash and the Apocrypha. They didn't use it, but they kind of peeked at it, and stuff like that. And then all this folklore and legends, but there were other sources that did talk about it. So thanks for mentioning Josephus. And the whole story of Hanukkah is like 165 BCE, 166 BCE. And I don't think I need to review this story for anybody, do I? The story of Hanukkah. But we'll see some different aspects, because of course Hanukkah is about much more than that little jug of oil that got lost and found. That was a story that came about probably much later. It's mentioned in the Talmud centuries later. And originally Hanukkah is about the victory over this colonizing army and the right to have your own religion. And there was a civil war going on, really, between the Jewish Hellenizers and the Jewish traditionalists. And of course, on a more primal level, it's this about light and about faith and about belief and all kinds of interesting things. But what it doesn't seem to be about is the feminine side. If you look at those chocolates that I showed you, it's all those burly Maccabee brothers, Judah and Simon and Eleazar and right, the fighting guys, and it's a holiday with testosterone, you could say. So what does it have to do with women? And also, oh, by the way, I'd like to ask if it's comfortable for people to show your face. It's so nice because I feel like you're behind a mechitza, and I can't see you, but I understand sometimes, you don't want to, but it's kind of a small group. So it's nice to see you if you're up for it. So let me show you. So what is Hanukkah special for women? Surprisingly, Jewish tradition also tells us that Hanukkah is kind of a special holiday for women. So I'm going to, again, share. All right, we had the Burley brothers. And now we have, okay, the first story I heard about Hanukkah. Well, actually, before I show you this, I'm going to stop for a moment and ask you any stories that you heard about Jewish women that have to do with Hanukkah. Before I show you that first story, has anybody heard any stories or growing up you heard, like the things you heard growing up, Jeffrey?
Well, you just hit it actually. Hannah and the martyrdom of her 7 sons, which is unfortunately the only feminist story of Hanukkah I've ever heard. So I'm waiting for a lot more.
I'm hoping to redeem it all this evening. So the story of Hannah and her 7 sons is also one of the first stories I heard, and it's like you want to run the other direction because it's very tragic and sad. And it's, well, many things like that happened in history. Whether that exact story is true, I wouldn't assume, but it first appeared in Second Maccabees, an apocryphal book, in other words, one that did not get into the Tanakh, composed in Greek about 40 years after the Hanukkah events, probably as a polemic to inspire the large Egyptian community in Alexandria to celebrate Hanukkah. So now let's go to that story, and I'll let somebody read it for us about Hannah and her 7 sons. Anybody want to read that? And maybe Elaine will call on people because I can't see everybody's face.
I'm happy to read it.
Okay, go for it, Carol.
Hannah and her 7 sons. A story told in 2 Maccabees, chapter 7, of 7 brothers who were seized along with their mother by Antiochus V Epiphanes, presumably shortly after the beginning of the religious persecution in 167-166 BCE, and commanded to prove their obedience to the king by partaking in swine's flesh. Boo! The brothers defiantly refused to do so. Encouraged by their resolve by their mother, they were executed after being put to frightful tortures. When the mother was appealed to by the king to spare the youngest child's life by prevailing upon him to comply, she urged the child instead to follow in the path of his brothers, and she herself died shortly thereafter. Accounts differ as to her death, but say that she took her own life in some way.
Right. This is summarized from putting together different versions as I found online, Jewish Virtual Library. Yeah, that's a story I heard long ago, and it's kind of like, this is so tragic and sad and pious and everything. And in fact, it's even contrary to Jewish law in a way, because you, according to rabbinic law, go ahead and eat the pork if it's going to save your life. Now, if they said bow to an idol, you're supposed to be willing to give your life. But, you know, the point of it is that maybe stories like this showed that Jewish loyalty to tradition and how they would be willing to even to die for the sake of keeping Judaism. Because unlike Purim, which is a story about destroying the Jewish body, right? It was an intended genocide. Hanukkah is more about trying to destroy the Jewish soul by coming in with a more powerful, I mean, again, traditional point of view, a more powerful culture, and with Antiochus Epiphanes, who was also called behind his back Epimanes, which meant the madman rather than the God manifest, Epiphanes. You know, he sort of outlawed Jewish practices, including circumcision and other key Shabbat and so forth. So people were willing to give their lives in order to maintain their Jewish practice. But let's turn to some other and happier stories. Anybody know any other stories from Hanukkah about women? Good. Well, I'm glad you don't, because now we're gonna learn some. So let's keep going. First of all, how is Hanukkah special for women? This is my favorite mitzvah. Don't work. So anyone want to read this for us?
I'd be happy to.
Thank you.
Don't work, ladies. On the 25th of Kislev start the 8 days of Hanukkah, and they are prohibited for eulogizing and fasting, but are permitted for doing work. The women have made it a custom not to do work while the candles are burning. And there is an opinion that says that we may not be lenient about this. Uh-oh.
No, you may not be lenient and say you don't have to do the custom. In other words, you have to do that custom.
Right. I just can't read the reference.
Oh, that's okay. It's from the Shulchan Aruch, which is the code of Jewish law. I put those references there if anybody, you know, wants the to look things up. In fact, I'm gonna that reminds me, I want to put in the chat a source sheet that I made, but just it's enough to say it's in the code of Jewish law. And also in the Talmud, Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi said, you want to keep reading?
Yes. Women are obligated in lighting the Hanukkah light, as they too were included in that miracle. Babylonian Talmud Shabbat 23a.
Yes. And yes, so it's interesting again, there's not a tractate about Hanukkah, and not a book about Hanukkah in the Talmud, which has many, many volumes. There is one about Megillah, about Purim. But Hanukkah, apparently we'll see it actually in a later slide that maybe the rabbis weren't so keen about the Hasmoneans, that is the dynasty that sprung from the Maccabees. But at any rate, so in this tractate about Shabbat, they start talking about candles, and that leads to talking about Hanukkah and so on. And they say women are obligated because you know that in traditional Jewish law, women are women are exempt from time-bound positive mitzvot. In other words, if it's a thing you have to do, not a no-no, but a thing you have to do, and you have to do it at a certain time, women are not obliged to do it because of presumably, different reasons, presumably because they're domestic duties or with the kids or whatever, they might not be able to do it. Okay. And yet they are obligated to light the candles of Hanukkah. And not only that, women got this special bonus custom of taking some time off after they grated all those potato latkes or whatever. And while those candles burned, they got to rest. So ladies, get the big candles, those great big tapers and big pot of oil. All right. I mean, I don't know. I'm just very taken. I'm extremely makpida. I'm extremely from and orthodox when it comes to this mitzvah because I don't like to do housework. However, a little more. And anyway, this also kind of evokes the question. I know saying begs the question is not really the correct thing to say, but it it is how people say, like, begs the question of what does it mean women were included in the miracle? Does it mean women were rescued by the miracle? They were somehow victimized and then they're rescued? Or does it mean that women were part of making the miracle? They were part of their heroines. We'll be seeing that. So now let's see, there's another even more fun way that women celebrate Hanukkah, especially as women. And this is, let's see. This is a special, it's a special North African and Sephardic Jewish tradition called the Chag HaBanot, or the Holiday of the Daughters, or in Arabic, because these Jews of North Africa spoke Arabic, Eid al-Banat. I'll read this one. It's a little hard to read, but it says, the seventh night of Hanukkah, which happens to be the new moon of Tevet, Rosh Chodesh Tevet, is known as Chag HaBanot Eid al-Banat, a North African Jewish women's holiday, especially was celebrated in Tunisia and also elsewhere like Morocco, Algeria, Libya, Greece, and Turkey. By the way, I asked my mother-in-law, who's I don't think I got the chance to ask my mother-in-law. I think she had passed away, but I asked other older women in my husband's family if they observed this, and they did not have recollection of observing it. And in Morocco, women would celebrate this holiday of the girls by feasting and remembering the heroine Judith, who we'll soon be learning about. Women would go to the synagogue and touch the Torah. The only time of the year they could do that, to hold the Torah. They had prayers for their daughters. Girls would make up with any friends they might have had a falling out with. And the women would give gifts or inheritances to the daughter, groom's presents to the bride. Now, Rabbi Jill Hammer writes that since this is on the full moon, the new moon is Rosh Chodesh, is always considered a special holiday for women. Traditionally, it's because we didn't give our golden jewelry for the golden calf, but also you could see the tie between the cycles of the moon and the cyclical nature of the female experience, a time especially associated with women. And this one happens to be the longest new moon night of the year. And so it makes sense this day was chosen as a day to celebrate women. And it has, in fact, been renewed in recent times. And you'll see occasionally there's groups in Israel that celebrate it. There's groups in the US who've celebrated it. It's kind of groovy and fun. but I don't think it's taken off like some of the other newly revised festivals on the Jewish calendar, because I don't see a lot about it like this year, maybe with all the other stuff that's gone on, in Israel. But has anyone ever heard of that, of this special women's holiday? Seventh night of Hanukkah, Rosh Chodesh. So, consider it. Okay. And now why? So why is it that women are included in the miracle? So let's look again at some sources. Okay, who would like to read this for us? Why are women included in the miracle? Anybody who hasn't read want to read?
Sure, I can read.
Okay, go ahead. Thank you, Pamela.
Women
And
are
thank you.
obligated to light Hanukkah candles, for they too were included in the miracle. This means that the enemies came to destroy everyone, men, women, and children. And there were those who say that the great miracle occurred through a woman. Midrash Kol Bo.
Kolbo, yeah, it's a midrash. It's okay. You don't need the full citations.
They were part of the same miracle. When the Greeks decreed that Jewish virgin brides were to be bedded first by the ruler, a woman brought about the miraculous rescue.
We'll have more on that shortly. And this is from Rashi. Rashi's comment to the part that we saw in the Talmud before. And Rashi's like this primary medieval commentator who lived in France. Okay, the next one from his descendants, the Tosfot, Rashbam, his grandson, I believe. You want to read that too, Pamela?
Rashbam explained that the primary part of the miracle was done by women. Purim by Esther, Hanukkah by Judith, Pesach, when they were saved in the merit of the righteous women of that generation.
Okay, so here's a bunch of different ways of interpreting that women are included in the miracle. Let's see how many things we have here. Hold on. We could say, first of all, everybody was going to be destroyed, men, women, and children. So women are included just because they're people, right? They're Jewish. And then there are those who say that it was a woman who helped save the day. We'll see who that might be. By the way, the picture on the right is like I think that's ours, but it's a little model of a Moroccan style menorah or Hanukkah. The next one is this story. Had you heard this terrible story about how the Greek ruler would sleep with these Jewish brides? Okay, we'll see some more about that in a moment. And then a woman brought the rescue. He didn't say who was the woman, but we'll see some possibilities. And then I like this one from Rashbam that, oh my goodness, women saved us again and again. Look at Purim, Esther, Hanukkah, Judith, who will, next slide, Passover. It was all the women, because it said, the sages said the righteous women of that generation are the ones that kept the whole nation going. They kept making sure that more Jews were being made and that we still had the courage to go on. Okay. So now let's see about this first woman, Judith. Now you might have heard of some great works of art like Judith in Holofernes by Michelangelo and Caravaggio. I did not put them on a slide because they are super gory and YouTube might take them down. I don't know. But you could look them up, Judith and Holofernes. But this is a very famous story in the Apocrypha. And who would like to read? Maybe Jeffrey, you want to read this one?
Yeah, I may, by the way, I can't, I just have to throw this out.
Please.
Paintings of Judith and Holofernes was by Artemisia, who was a great woman painter of the Renaissance, Baroque. So you have a great women's painting by a wonderful woman artist.
What's her name?
Artemisia Zaleski. She was the daughter of Orazio, and she was a painter of the 16th century.
That's fabulous. Well,
her name is Artemisia.
Thank you for, yes? Artemisia.
Artemisia.
Artemisia with a C or an S? Whatever, we'll look it up. She, I think that's great. I mean, the story of Judith, again, an apocryphal story, but with a lot of retellings throughout the centuries, is very, caught the imagination of many artists, and it has many, many renditions. So would you like to read this
Sure.
slide, Jeffrey?
All right. Holofernes, an Assyrian general besieges Jerusalem. The male elders think that all is lost unless God comes up with a miracle to save them. Judith, a beautiful widow from the nearby town of Betulia, tells the elders that she has a plan, although they dismiss her and are prepared to surrender. She asks for one more chance, dresses up, attracts the general's attention, and is brought to him. She woos him, flatters him, feeds him cheese, gets him thirsty, gets him drunk, beheads him, puts his head in a sack, inspires the men to do battle. Summarized from the book of Judith.
Yeah, so and in fact, that reminds me the second slide is should you have cheese at your plate at your Hanukkah party? Why don't you read this one too?
Sure. Should you have a cheese plate at your Hanukkah party?
Yes.
Her name was Judith, as the story goes, and she was the daughter of Yochanan, the high priest. She was extremely beautiful, and the Greek king wanted her to lay with him. She fed him a dish of cheese to make him thirsty, so that he would drink a great deal and become drunk and recline and fall asleep. And it happened just that way. And once he was asleep, she took his sword and cut off his head. She brought his head to Jerusalem, and when the army saw that their leader had been killed, they fled. For this reason, we have the custom of eating a cheese dish in Hanukkah.
With caution, eat it with caution, right? Didn't go well for the first person that indulged in that cheese plate. Well, you could see the story changed a little by the time they got to this medieval midrash, because now she's in Jerusalem, she's not in a little town, and actually she's the daughter of the high priest, and it's the Greek king, it's not a general. So, the story goes through different permutations as it's retold. The original one, the Apocrypha, I'll say a little bit about it. Again, Apocrypha, the Greek Apocrypha are books from the biblical period that didn't make it in the Bible and include this book of Judith in Greek. It is included in the Catholic canon as a deuterocanonical book. Scholars tell us that the textual and contextual evidence shows that the original was in Hebrew. It has a post-exilic setting, in other words, after the Babylonian exile, Persian words, Hellenistic features, and distinctively Maccabean, Hasmonean elements. So some say it was composed about 135 to 105 before the Common Era during this Hasmonean dynasty. That is the descendants of the Maccabees, who were actually priests, became kings, which is a no-no. Priests are not supposed to be kings. And there's other stories in the Bible in which a woman uses her womanly wiles, her seductive power, her charm and beauty, and then sometimes gets violent and sometimes is just clever in order to save the day and save the people. Can anybody tell me other?
I got one.
Jeffrey, I bet you do. You know a lot of them. Okay.
One of my favorite people is married to a woman named Yael, and she is a cantor.
Yael.
And we talk to Yael Fishman, and we joke all the time about her giving him a headache, because Yael was a woman who pounded a tent peg through the head of the Syrian general Sisera when the battle with Deborah. When Deborah,
I think he was a Philistine, but don't quote me on that.
Philistine. Wait a
I
minute.
think that's before the Syrian. But anyway, he was the enemy.
He was the
And
enemy.
Yael was like this Bedouin woman who,
She pounded the peg through his head, and that's where we get tonight. We have a headache,
Oh, not tonight, dear. You have a headache. No, it's she's woos him, seduces him, gets him drunk, and kills him with a tent peg. And that's in the story of Deborah. It's added to the story of Deborah in the book of Judges, right? So that's much like it. You see similar motifs. Also, any other seductive women, for good or ill, in the Bible that you can think of? Anybody else got some thoughts? If you're shy and you don't want to say it, you can put it in the chat. But Delilah, exactly. That's one I was going. Who said that? Sorry, Pamela. Oh, thank you. Yeah, Delilah. She wasn't a good seductress, but she was a seductress of Samson. Also in the book of Judges. By the way, just popped into the chat a link to my source sheet for tonight, which is on Sepharia, this book of Jewish sources, if anybody wants to look at some of the text later. Oh, and thank you for the and Pamela's put something about a novel, historical novel about that artist, Artemisia, if I'm saying it right, the Passion. Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Others, I mean, we have Purim, which has Esther using her feminine charms to, get the king to get on her side, to make him a little jealous, and to finally save the day for everybody. And if also you could think about Tamar, and the story of Judah and Tamar in the book of Genesis, where his widowed daughter-in-law, who's not able to remarry because of his negligence, then dresses herself up as a woman in the oldest profession, and she, conceives a child with him, and that child would someday be the ancestor of the Messiah. So there's a lot of stories like this, right? Professor Deborah Aguirre says that this apocryphal story in the book of Judith seems to disappear from Jewish sources and makes a comeback in the 10th century or so. In the Hebrew tales and commentaries, as much as that last one we read with the grilled cheese sandwich on it. In these medieval Jewish works, Judith became associated with Hanukkah because she wasn't originally associated with Hanukkah. It was originally seemed to be from a completely different era. It just kind of got pinned to Hanukkah. And perhaps that was the hidden intent of the original apocryphal work. It says there's a fictitious king of the Assyrians, and not the Babylonians, as he should be, Nebuchadnezzar, who wants to be worshipped. And this recalls Antiochus IV, Epiphanes, who wants to be worshipped as a god. General Holofernes seems to be a stand-in for the Seleucid general Nicanor, whose head was hung at the citadel in Jerusalem by Judah the Maccabee. And Judith herself, what about her name, Judith? And it's kind of like
Female Jew, you did.
And also Judah Maccabee, like the main Maccabee is Judah, and Judith is like the female version. So sorry if sounds a little convoluted, but basically the apocryphal work isn't really about the Maccabee period. It's like a different period and seems to be associated more with the Babylonians and Assyrians, and sort of gets pasted onto Hanukkah centuries later. But this professor in Israel is saying maybe the original work was a veiled reference to the Hanukkah story, but people didn't feel with the Greek domination and this imperial domination or even Roman domination, that they could just tell stories like that. They had to make it something in the distant past. You following me? So somehow, though, Judith does get associated in the Jewish imagination as a heroine of the Hanukkah story. Okay, and we got a good book. All right. Are you saying the good book is the Passion of, which is the good book? Okay, great. So any thoughts about Judith as a Hanukkah heroine? Anyone want to speak up about Judith? If you've heard of her before, how does that strike you, this story of Judith?
When I was growing up, it was always kind of reported that Hanukkah was not an important religion in Judaism.
An important holiday? You mean like
not an important holiday or a marker of anything, and that it basically had gotten caught up in the commercialism that we have for Christmas, and that's how it all smushed together.
I mean, I think that's fair to say. Just a second, I was just going to put another thing. Let me get one up. I was distracted by one thing here that I'm going to put in the chat. Yeah, I mean, I also heard that too, and I think that's fair to say, right? It's not that it's not important, but it wasn't like the major Jewish holiday. There's so many others that are more important, and Hanukkah is a nice little holiday where you light a menorah and play dreidel and eat fried foods. But it became much more important, not just commercialized, but I think because of Christmas. Like, we have to say to our kids, oh, we've got to a holiday at the same time. So people look at it as the Jewish Christmas. All right. And they both got a little commercialized. I think that's fair to say. So maybe by putting the women back in it, we'll add a new dimension to it. I hope that's helpful.
Kind of moving this a bit forward,
Yes.
was when Golda Meir was the prime minister,
Yeah.
was there any kind of similarity discussed between her and other women Jewish leaders?
Well, there was you know, there's a book, I think it's oh, look, somebody maybe Google this. It's called Deborah, Golda, and Me. It was Letty Pogrebin, I think, or one of the Pogrebin women. She wrote about growing up. Somebody want to just look that up really quick and see the correct title. She wrote about, you know, that when she was growing up, the only important Jewish women she heard about were Deborah back in the Bible, Golda Meir in modern times as the prime minister of Israel, and, you know, and then she, I guess on her own, began to explore that there are so many famous Jewish women or great Jewish women that we didn't learn enough about. And that's what we're, you know, one of the things we're trying to do tonight. But I don't know if Golda was ever really associated with a Hanukkah story. I'd have to look that up. I don't know. Okay, Deborah, Golda, and Me, you got it. Fern has the book like sitting right there. That's great. And it's by Letty Pogrebin. Great. Being Female and Jewish in America. Fabulous. Thank you, group. The hive mind has worked. And now I just wanted to give you one more link just for fun. When I was looking at these things about Judith, the Jewish Women's Archive had a page about other Judiths, famous Jewish women, or not so famous, but should be famous Jewish women named Judith, which of course does mean like Jew, you know, like Judah. It's a Jew and a praiser of God. And if you want to look up other famous Judiths throughout history, that could be fun. All right. So any other thoughts about Judith, the warrior woman? We've had the martyr woman, Hannah, the victim. We've had the warrior woman using both her beauty and charm and her, you know, bravery and courage and daring and, you know, lack of the squeamishness to be able to fight and win, the warrior. Okay, so here's another. Are you ready for something that's even something I don't think we'd be able to do in a Sunday school for the kids? But let's go. All right, so we had Judith. Now we're getting to this thing about how the women were being abused by the Greek ruler of some sort, a Greek official, and what story arose out of that? So does anybody feel like reading this one? Otherwise, I will do it. Anybody?
Yeah, I'll read it.
Thank you, Elaine.
Okay. Okay. The Greeks decreed that Jewish virgin brides were to be bedded first by the ruler, but a woman brought about the miraculous rescue. Rashi on Shabbat 23b. Various legends tell that during the persecution of the Jews by Antiochus, a Greek official was allowed to sexually molest Jewish brides on their wedding night. The high priest Mattathias,
yeah.
Daughter Hannah was to be wed. She doesn't want to be hashtag me too. At the ceremony, she rips open her clothes, shocking everyone. They are ready to kill her at first and cries, "Where are all the good men? Are you ashamed by my nakedness, but not ashamed about abandoning me to that uncircumcised one?" Her brothers are moved by her action and stage a Trojan horse type of attack in which they parade the bride over to the Greek ruler and then attack once in the palace. And that was how the Jewish rebellion really began.
Okay. And another, I just put in one medieval version, because there's different versions of all the stories. her own betrothed, Eleazar the Maccabee, comes to the rescue. Right. I'm not really sure that works because I thought that those were the sons of the high priest. But anyway, how did you learn in religious school or in Hebrew school that the rebellion began against Antiochus and the Assyrian Greeks? Anyone hear a story growing up? And it wasn't that story, I bet. Maybe it was another story.
Well, the way I heard in Cincinnati, Ohio, was that one of the Jews was going to sacrifice to Antiochus. Mattathias struck him down, raised his sword, and saying, "All who are faithful follow me." So he struck the traitor to the earth, of the lines I remember.
Exactly that. You got it. It was in the town of Modi'in. I was singing with the kids. We all live in the town of Modi'in, the town of Modi'in, the town of Modi'in. So they were living in this little town of Modi'in, and there was a Jew who was a Hellenized Jew ready to go along and sacrifice, I think it was a pig or something really un-Jewish, and that Mattathias kills him. So it gives you this other side of the Maccabees. I mean, were they freedom fighters for freedom of religion, or were they kind of like super zealous, intolerant? I mean, we don't really know. It's a legend, but at any rate, he, kills this sinner, and then he says, "Mila Shem Elai, whoever's for God, come with me." And they all head for the hills, and they start the rebellion against the Assyrian Greeks. The Greek Empire was in two parts: the Assyrian part and the Ptolemies down in Egypt. So, how does that compare to this story? Which story do you prefer, in a sense? How would you like to tell this story? How could you tell this story? Any thoughts about it, or is everyone just like shocked into silence?
You want to be Jewish, but you're right, and you're right too.
You're right. Either way is a good way. I think it's just great that there's
both great stories.
Different ways to tell the story. And of course, they're both pretty legendary. There's not really an evidence of them, but stories like that did happen, right? So
well, I think the Judah story is much more attractive.
It's attractive because they're like killing.
Well, because it's the injustice against women.
The Judah, you mean the story about the woman that I just told you? That's a better story?
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that Judith? Was her name Judith? No?
Well, we're going to see what was her name. Well, they called her Hannah.
Oh, Hannah. Oh, okay.
But it might have been, we'll see about that. Okay.
Yeah, well, anyway, but I think that's, of course, that story resonates more to us today because of the whole Me Too movement and all the, all the injustices that are going on against women. So in a sense, it's certainly a more meaningful story for us today, I think, than the other story.
Do you know what it reminds me of in the news? You saw the story about a woman in Iran who was just tore off her veil and her clothes and started dancing around because she's like, I can't stand it anymore, and that was like just to show her body, which would be normal on the beach in Rehoboth, was like this daring act of standing up for herself, risking her life. Who knows what happened to her after that, or the women that take off their veils and some of them are killed. Or so women, this is the story of a woman who ripped open her clothes to shock everybody into action. They were intimidated. They were kind of victims. All right. There's something else I wanted to say. Okay. Well, anyway, now you have a different view of women, right? We had the martyr, the warrior, and now you have how would you describe her as an archetype, this woman, Hannah? And Carol, do you have a thought?
A fighter?
She is a fighter, but she doesn't really get up and fight. she motivates the other people to
Yeah.
fight.
She's,
Cheryl to June,
she's rebellious.
a rebel. I love that. Yes, she rebels against her fate and against the convention, against the abuse. So let's see. She's become kind of popular now with some of these people who are finding new meanings in Hanukkah. So, oh, by the way, I want to say one other thing before I get into this. It's in last week's Torah portion. Vayishlach. There's a story that is somewhat like this. There, in which men sneak into a town on, pretense, and then they kill everybody. What is that? Jeffrey,
Let me take a shot. It was Dina's brothers avenging her defilement.
right, Dina.
Yeah, Dina.
Right. Okay, so Dina is raped by this local prince, or different people have told it differently, that maybe she was seduced or she liked him or whatever, but that's how it comes across, definitely. And then her brothers are like, well, she can marry you if you all get circumcised, and then they basically massacre everybody. So not exactly like this story, but I just want to show you that these stories that are told and retold, you see the same thing sometimes again and again. Okay, but now let's find something more interesting with this. That people suggested now. So an Israeli educator is reading about, no, I'm going the wrong way. Wait, oh, sorry guys. Screen sharing stopped. All right, let's try it again. Oh dear. Oh my goodness. Okay, can you see the screen now? I'm gonna enlarge it now. Okay.
Here it is.
Wait, my laptop is starting to make strange sounds, if you can see it without me showing you the whole screen, that would be better. Can you see this screen? Because sometimes my whole computer might shut down. So there's an Israeli educator, Sigal Leah Raveh, who really got into these stories. And she suggests that these two stories of Hannah and Judith are really one tradition. So this is a little like what Stan was asking. What was her name, Judith or Hannah? Maybe it was Hannah Judith or Judith Hannah. And by the way, it's kind of two of my Hebrew names, Yudit and Hannah, like Yehudit Tova Hannah. Yudit meaning a Jew, a female Judah Maccabee. Hannah sounds like Hanukkah dedication. The Judith tradition, she says, well, again, with Professor Guerra had said that it's not a historical mistake, but the tale of Judith may have purposely changed the historical setting and mixed it up to conceal a story that was really about the Seleucid Greeks. In order to avoid the dangerous subject of a virgin rebelling against the decrees, being a rebel, the story was changed to a safer protagonist, a pious yet beautiful widow. And Betulia, the town of Judith, doesn't actually exist, but guess what? It means virgin or virginity, hinting that maybe she was a virgin, and in some medieval tales, indeed she is. So more fascinating, points of view about the story of Hannah and Judith, and maybe they're one and the same. They're different kinds of heroines. And I think as far as combining them, it shows this idea of women as rebels, women as fighters, women who are courageous, women whose stories have yet to be told. And you can almost see like Gal Gadot playing in in the leading role, right? As a Wonder Woman. Yeah. Do you think this is female empowerment of some sort? But some people say that maybe these stories were male projections and anxieties of Jewish vulnerability by telling these stories about the women who were being victimized, and sometimes the men coming to their rescue, sometimes the women. I don't know, any thoughts about these? Because I got one more for you before we finish, but any thoughts about Judith, Hannah, Judith? You'll take her over Hannah the martyr. I know. Are you ready to add these to your Hanukkah celebrations? Pamela is, yes. Okay, and actually, you can put it in the chat if you don't want to. Show us, you can tell us. All right, finally though, there is the female Maccabee queen. Have you heard of her? If you're in Israel, you might have seen a street sign that said Shlom Tzion HaMalka, Queen Salome Alexandra. She was the Maccabee queen. We're going to see that now.
I mean, Maccabee queen or later Hasmonean dynasty.
That's right. She wasn't
The what
exactly a
dynasty?
Maccabee,
That's
but
not me and
Oh, that's after,
Okay.
that's what Maccabee said.
so the Maccabees, can we see this well enough on the screen? Okay. The Maccabees were warriors, priests, and rulers, which was, again, not really proper because priests, Kohanim, are not supposed to be kings, but they did form their own dynasty. And they eventually became Hellenized, ironically. They eventually invited in the Romans, and it's very ironic because they were fighting for freedom. But several generations down the road, they were, part of the establishment. Anyway, the sons of Mattiyahu, Judah, Maccabee, Shimon, Simon, Yonatan, Yochanan, Eleazar, but there's also a famous Maccabee queen, you could say, because she's a queen of the Hasmonean dynasty, the Hashmonaim, descendants of the Maccabees. And one of my teachers, Rabbi Leonovic, called her the peaceful Maccabee, also known in Greek as Salome Alexandra. Would somebody like to read about what the Talmud says about Shlom Tzion, the queen, or Salome Alexandra? Anyone want to read who maybe hasn't read yet or has read yet?
The
I
peaceful.
can read. Go ahead.
Who started?
You take it.
Julie, pick somebody.
Okay, Fern was, I think, was
Okay.
starting there. Okay, Fern.
The peaceful Maccabee, a Jewish queen of the Hasmonean Maccabean dynasty. During her rule, 76 to 67 BCE, as a reward for her piety, rain fell only on Sabbath, Friday nights, so that the working class suffered no loss of pay through the rain falling during their work time. The fertility of the soil was so great that the grains of wheat grew as large as kidney beans, oats as large as olives, and lentils as large as gold coins.
And this is it from the Talmud, Tractate Shabbat. It also mentioned that she's an early advocate for women's rights, workers' rights, Torah learning, the functioning of the Sanhedrin, the rabbinic court, and diplomacy instead of warfare and expansionism. Wow, she was really great. She came into being the queen after her husband, who was anti-Pharisee, died, but she was pro-Pharisee, which means pro the proto-rabbis, which is why they really liked her much more than any of their Hasmoneans who had kind of persecuted the Pharisees. So kind of a cool story. What do you think about having a Jewish queen as nice as her? Shlom Tzion. Good. So right, which means peace, the peace of Zion, right? Very nice. So that's another woman image of Hanukkah. So we've had, let's see, martyrs, warriors, rebels, and rulers, I guess, right? So you've got them all. We've had the first Hannah, Judith, and Hannah Judith, and now you have Shlom Tzion. And then the last slide I want to show you is a kind of a woman's song for Hanukkah that some of these women in Israel who want to bring in more of the women's part of Hanukkah and the holiday of the women, the festival of the girls that they had in Tunisia, and some of these other figures. They rewrote some of the songs like a Hanukkah, oh Hanukkah. So they did in Hebrew, and I can't remember, but I think this is their own translation to English. Anyone could sing it along with me, although maybe muted. Okay. Hanukkah, oh Hanukkah, let's dance through the night. Brave Hanukkah, turn darkness to light. He refuses to surrender to the terrible king. Let's have a party and a song we will sing. And while we are playing, the candles are burning low. One for each night, they shed a sweet light to remind us of days long ago. One for each night, they shed a sweet light to remind us of days long ago. So I'd like to conclude by asking you maybe to put in the chat something you learned tonight that you're going to take away to your celebration of Hanukkah this year, or you can just share it out loud also if you prefer. And let's see what, if this added something to your observance.
Just about all of it. Thank you.
All of it, you're welcome.
Yeah, it was all an enlightenment. I'm happy to celebrate women.
Oh, that's great, Harvey. Thank you.
What do we say? Me too.
Yes, you do in a good way. Okay.
It is really terrific. And my father's wife is Judy. And so I just actually forwarded this to him so he could speak it to her because she is his beloved. So.
Okay. Well, I have the recording, and I'm also going to teach this class again on Thursday evening for a JCC program in Wilmington, but also on Zoom. Let's see what else we have in the chat. It says, wonderful. Wonderful and good to know it, says Carol. And Fern says, thank you, Rabbi. I like knowing these strong women in their own way. And I think it would be kind of cool, to do something with that Rosh Chodesh. Not maybe to just make it a thing segregated for women, but to honor these female heroines, again, whether they were martyrs, warriors, rebels, or rulers, and all the women throughout history that have kept Hanukkah going. So I guess I conclude by saying that if we look at our holidays again, as we read earlier, women are part of the story, like Rashbam said. Thank you. Welcome, Elaine. Esther and Purim, the midwives and Miriam and Pharaoh's daughter on Passover, Sarah and Hannah, another Sarah and Hannah on Rosh Hashanah. Likewise with Hanukkah, women are part of the story. When our stories are forgotten, still we persist and we return, and our goal now is to find a usable past, retell the stories in new ways that work for us, and to find role models for our daughters of the future. Maybe not doing the same exact things as these women, but being motivated by their spirit. Thank you for all the kind words in the chat.
Thank you.
And I'll stop the recording right now. And thank you. And if you want to stay after and chat, that's fine.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
You're
I think
welcome.
there's more consciousness of the women involvement in the